Extremely excited to be here with you tonight. I've got a lot to cover. It's going to be a jam-packed radio show. Sitting in for Charlie McGrath, you're listening to the Austin Report with Gabe Elton on the one and only Rinse Radio Network. The video that we're going to put on YouTube after this, I'm going to tell Charlie to go ahead and title it, The Pied Pipers Are Leading Us Over a Cliff. Because that is what is happening in America today. That's what's happening in the world today, is we have a group of Pied Pipers that are telling us lies. They're covering the truth. It happens in almost every segment of society, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight, is the geopolitical events, not necessarily relating directly to gold, although I have a lot of power-packed information about gold and silver, but generally just the world in general and what we're being told and how it's a complete lie as to what happens on a day-to-day basis in the world today. So, speaking of Pied Pipers, I wanted to look into the legend a little bit of the Pied Piper and tell you guys a little bit about it. And this comes from Wikipedia. It says, the Pied Piper of Hamelin is the subject of a legend concerning the departure or death of a great number of children from the town of Hamelin, Germany in the Middle Ages. The earliest references describe a piper dressed in multicolored clothing, leading the children away from the town, never to return. In the 16th century, the story was expanded into a full narrative in which the piper is a rat catcher hired by the town to lure away rats with his magic pipe. But when the citizenry refuses to pay for his service, he retaliates by turning his power that he put in his instrument on the children, leading them away as he had the rats. This version of the story spread as folklore. The version also appeared in the writings of Wolfgang van Goethe, the brothers Grimm, and Robert Browning. Theories have been proposed suggesting that the Pied Piper is a symbol of the children's death by plague or catastrophe. Other theories liken him to figures of the Nicholas of Cologne, who is said to have lured away a great number of children on a disastrous children's crusade. Well, in this particular reference, the children are the general public. The children are the ones who believe what they're being told on the mainstream media. And they believe where they're being led by the Pied Pipers that they see on television and on all the major networks out there. And it's not just the Pied Pipers on the networks. It's the Pied Pipers who are financial managers. It's the Pied Pipers who are, run the pension funds. It's the Pied Pipers on Wall Street. Those are the people who run the world today. It's the inflation Pied Pipers. Prices are going through the roof, but nobody is going to tell you the truth. It's definitely not the Pied Pipers in the government, and it's definitely not the ones in the media. We talked a few weeks ago that packages are continually getting smaller, where you go, you try to find a pound of bacon these days. You can't find it. You can find 12 ounces of bacon. You can't buy a pound of bacon. It's almost impossible. And yet, we talk about Pampers. There's used to hold 100 diapers. Now there's only 92. So that's one way the Pied Piper's leading you over a cliff, is they make their packages smaller, charge you the same amount, and hopefully you're not going to notice. And that's, let's say that the numbers that the government are giving us regarding inflation are accurate. First of all, everyone knows the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, is flawed. It takes into account saying that if the price of steaks go up, well, then you can substitute it with hamburger. So that wasn't really a rise in prices. Okay. So, this is that pixie dust, the special magic dust that the government can sprinkle on data, or sprinkle on its citizenry, or that the media can sprinkle in their reports that make you believe that things are okay because, the price of steak went up, so let's have hamburger helper for dinner. The Fed's goal with inflation is 2% per year. Do you guys know what that means? If they reach their goal, and everyone knows it's way worse than they're admitting, but if they reach their goal of 2% inflation per year, They are telling you that they're going to completely devalue the dollar every 100 years. Or excuse me, every 50 years at 2% inflation. The dollar will be 100% devalued. That is their goal. That is their stated goal. And that's what they're saying. And they're finally starting to admit to some inflation, but they're not quite where we need to be, you see. And so real inflation, if you go to the grocery store, you know, is way worse than that. The average food prices are up over 15% in the first 6 months of this year. That's 30% inflation per year at this rate. And John Williams, who runs Shadow Stats, he says that inflation is at 7% a year. At this rate, at 7% a year, do you know that the dollar will be completely wiped out every 14 and a half years? Every 14 and a half years, your savings will be completely wiped out. What are you doing today to protect yourself from, one, what the government admits to is that they want to wipe out your savings every 50 years, or two, what's really happening that says the value of the dollar at this rate will be wiped out every 14 and a half years. That's 7% inflation. You go to the grocery store, you're going to feel inflation is a lot worse than 7%. But even if it's just 7%, that's every 14 and a half years. And, you know, I wrote here in my notes here, do you understand what this means? And of course, the people listening to me tonight understand what that means. Probably most of the people who listen to the YouTube video afterwards are going to know what it means. But the reason why is because you go to the grocery store. However, if you followed these Pied Pipers in the media, if you followed the Pied Pipers in the government, well, then everything's okay. It's not bad at all. And that is the magic that they have on people. That is the control that they have on people. Is we live in a world where the majority of the public doesn't question what they're told. Not on the media, not from the government. And it allows people to continually take advantage of the common man, and it benefits those at the top. And, you know, moving on, you've also got the Pied Pipers about this IRS scandal. I mean, do you guys, I know you guys don't, but do the Democrats expect us to believe that all the pertinent information from 6 different hard drives are gone forever? And that people are going to actually buy that? Do you know that some of the Pied Pipers in the media actually buy that? That 6 different hard drives were destroyed and there's no way to get these emails? You see, those Pied Pipers, they want everyone to focus on hard drives. But folks, emails aren't stored on hard drives. Emails are stored on servers, and generally multiple servers. And there is a documented record of it that doesn't exist on a hard drive. But those Pied Pipers in the media want everyone, and I'm starting to believe even including the government, even on the Republican side, want everyone to believe that this data is lost forever because of a few hard drives that got destroyed. You see, that's the type of Pied Pipers that we have to deal with. We have a good majority of the population that thinks that emails are stored on hard drives. And, you know, another thing is, let's assume that emails were stored on hard drives. You have an IRS that's required to have this data backed up. It's called RAID hard drives. Basically what it is 2 different hard drives. So not only does the data exist on Lois Lerner's hard drive, but it also exists on 2 more additional backup hard drives. Okay? So that's 3 different hard drives just for Lois Lerner. Triplicate records. And now you add in the fact that 6 different hard drives crashed at the same time. Well, those 6 hard drives also are backed up to 2 additional hard drives. So we're talking about 18 hard drives that crashed that all contain the pertinent information that we are looking for, I say we as the American people are looking for a true answer to whether the government is not prosecuting certain segments of the population based on their political beliefs. We're supposed to believe that all 18 of them failed all at once. You know, tell the IRS that on your tax return and see what they have to say to you. And the New York Post put it best, and they said the thing about dogs eating homework is it could actually happen. This can't. This is the dog ate my hard drive, broke into another building, ate the backup of the hard drive, then broke into 6 other top officials' offices, and it ate their hard drives also. You see, but the Pied Pipers want you to believe that emails exist on hard drives. They want you to believe that this information is not recoverable. They want you to believe that this is a partisan event, and it's not. You know, it's the same thing as this flood of immigrants that's coming in, and we're shipping them into the interior portion of the United States. You know, even those people who believe that we should have open borders, this is not sustainable. You cannot do this. You cannot have an influx of these types of immigrants. You know, there's plenty of things that we're going to talk about tonight where I could point to and say, this is the fire that started the powder keg. This is the flame that ignited the revolution. This is the flame that ignites the dollar crash. This is the flame that ignites World War III. You know, it's like, it's all out there, all around us. We can all see it, but the Pied Pipers aren't going to tell us about it, which means the majority of the mainstream American public are going to be left in the dark. And that is scary. And it's not only, I mean, it's the major majority, not just a small majority. You know, and you could just keep going down the list. Let's look at what's going on in Iraq. You talk about the Pied Pipers of Iraq. These are the same guys that are bringing us the IS invasion in Iraq, are the same guys that brought us shock and awe in Iraq. They're the same people who brought us Libya, where we employed the same freedom fighters that are fighting today in Syria. We started employing them in Libya when Obama announced his kinetic action. You see, these are the same guys. And then we brought them into Syria to displace Assad. And now they're coming into Iraq, and John McCain, all the rest of the group want missile strikes. They want to bomb the so-called ISIS in Iraq, but call the ISIS freedom fighters in Syria because we arm them and give them money and training. And now here we have a group that's taking over Iraq. Okay? This could be the flame that lit the powder keg. The powder keg. We don't know it right now, but if we look back in 5 to 10 years, hopefully this financial disaster that we see has come and gone. Hopefully we have diverted World War III. Hopefully we will be able to look back in 5 to 10 years and say, you know what? This all started in 2014. Everything that we're seeing today started in 2014. And what's happening in Iraq today, it's not about going into Iraq to stop ISIS. This is about going into Syria. This is about going into Iran and by proxy, Russia. You know, isn't it convenient that U.S. Humvees that were captured by the ISIS are now paraded in Syria? Isn't that convenient? The same group, you know, we've been wanting to do airstrikes in Syria for, you know, probably over a year now. And the public wouldn't go for it. Well, maybe the public will go for it if ISIS steals a bunch of Humvees that we've given to the Iraqi government and brings them back into Syria. Maybe that's a reason to go into Syria. Well, another thing that happened today is a cadre of ISIS troops, ISIS, I don't even want to call them troops, terrorists, I guess is the best word. They were bombed today by fighter jets. Now, the word on the street and then starting to leak out in the media is it wasn't U.S. jets that bombed ISIS. that it was probably the Syrian Air Force or the Iranian Air Force. Now, they were bombed on the border. In fact, I believe it was closer to Iraq, more so in Iraq. And now, isn't that perfect? Now you have either Iranian or Syrian Air Force bombing ISIS. So not only do we need to quell the advance from ISIS, but we also have to quell the advance from the Syrian Air Force or the Iranian Air Force. You see, in fact, today, ISIS held a parade in Mosul, in Iraq, a parade in the middle of the day, showing off all of their U.S. armaments and artillery. A parade. And the world is waiting for the next trigger. I know the U.S., maybe not military, but the CIA and the government is waiting for the next trigger. All they want to do is drop some more bombs for the military-industrial complex, and that's where we're headed. The world is waiting for the next trigger, and I think whenever we come back, I think whenever we have this happen over there in Iran, and we go back in there, it could be the trigger that starts World War III. And let me tell you, you better have your gold and silver positions on before that date. I'm going to kind of preview what we're going to do when we get back from the break, talking about these Pied Pipers. One of the biggest examples of the media's diversion that I've ever seen happened this week. And it happened during an interview on CNBC. And I'm going to play that interview when we get back, tell you a little bit about what led me to talking about Pied Pipers on tonight's show. Basically, it's a Mark Faber interview. Mark Faber's a well-known billionaire investor who runs a newsletter called the Doom and Gloom Report. And he's a very good financial prognosticator. He's one of the only ones out there to tell people to buy gold and silver. And it is a very telling short interview that I'm going to play when we get back from the break. And that is going to show you the epitome of a Pied Piper and how the media is talking down gold, how the media is very much part of this whole facade that's put forth by the government, that's put forth by the media, and that's put forth by very educated people who I think don't know any better. Because in order for them to admit what's happening is really happening, they would have to admit that everything they were taught in school is wrong. And for some people, that is groundbreaking. For some people, you're not going to see that happen. But I had a client ask me this week, he said, Gabe, there's a lot of smart people in the world. Why aren't they buying gold? And I told him it's because they spent too much time in school. For them to forget stocks and bonds and buy gold, that would be an admission that everything they were taught was wrong. They were taught the Keynesianism economics model that says government stimulus is good and that you could print money without causing inflation and that the government should create jobs and that the government should be the arbiter of the entire economy. Well, guess what? Thousands of years of human history proves that wrong. Milton Friedman proved that wrong, and even he was wrong about gold. And so we're going to get into this and just kind of give you a striking example of how the United States media, especially the financial press, talks down the gold price while cheerleading stocks. Many of you might have heard of Mark Faber. He's a German billionaire, fund manager, very well known. And here is a short clip of him on CNBC. I'm going to go ahead and play it before the break, I guess, now.
If an investor is looking at gold versus cash right now, how would you advise them?
I would tell what I've said all along is that investors should have some exposure to gold. I have an exposure of approximately 25%, and just recently when it dropped, I bought some more because I think that eventually the monetary policies of central banks will lead to, say, a further loss of purchasing power in the value of paper money. We had everywhere a colossal asset inflation. Nothing is particularly cheap. Now I can say gold is relatively cheap compared to equities at the present time. Gold shares, some of them are down 80-90% from the peak. So I can say they are relatively attractive.
Mark,
but
if I may
everything has
interject,
been inflated.
I hear what you're saying about gold, but then why is it that investors are shunning gold at the moment?
Because the media doesn't like gold. Nobody at CNBC owns gold. Nobody at Bloomberg owns gold. None of the Fed members owns gold. Gold is being constantly talked down by the media and Fed officials and economists who also don't own any gold.
So you're blaming CNBC for gold's demise?
I beg your pardon?
I said, so you're blaming CNBC and the rest of the media outlets for gold's demise? I find that a little bit difficult to believe.
I'm not. I'm just saying that when people talk about people who are optimistic about gold, they call them gold bugs.
Correct.
A bug is an insect. I don't call equity bulls cockroaches. You understand? There is already a negative connotation with the expression of gold bug.
All right, Mark Faber, let's go ahead and leave it there on that.
Did you hear that? You see, Mark Faber explained to them exactly what's going on. And I'm going to talk about that on the backside of this break. See you on the backside, and looking forward to talking to you again. All right, Gabe Elton of the Austin Report here with you, sitting in for Charlie McGrath of Wide Awake News on the one and only W.A.N.Radio network. Appreciate you sitting in here with me tonight. If anybody has any questions, feel free to call into the network. We'd love to get you on here. But, you know, we were talking about the Pied Piper, you know, the famous legend, supposedly, of the Pied Piper of Hamelin, who used to, originally started is that a guy would come through town dressed in multicolored clothing, playing his bagpipes, and the children would just follow him away from town, never to return. And, you know, the title of this particular video and radio show is going to be The Pied Pipers Are Leading Us Over a Cliff. And that is true with inflation numbers. That is true with these IRS hearings. That is true with what's going on in the Veterans Administration, with the VA hospitals. It's true about Iraq. It's true about the Ukraine. And it's even more so true about the gold and silver markets. And you just heard Mark Faber, the gloom, doom, boom, and doom report on CNBC. And the lady opens up, why, where should people go? And Mark Faber says, I recommend people buy gold. And she's like, well, gold has done so badly. Why would you recommend gold? And I'm going to play this short part one more time. And this is his response.
Just saying that when people talk about people who are optimistic about gold, they call them gold bugs.
Correct.
A bug is an insect. I don't call equity bulls cockroaches. You understand?
Do you understand? I love his accent because it's a perfect compliment to what he just said. We don't call people who buy stocks equity cockroaches. You understand? You see? And that's what it's going to take to wake up the public. And the best part about this particular example of the lamestream media being Pied Pipers is that the very next day they had a article come out in CNBC, and the title was "Blame the Media for Gold's Decline," and this was published on Tuesday, June 17th. And it says investors who favor gold have provided many reasons for gold's nearly 30% decline in 2013 and overall demolition since it hit $1,934 an ounce in September 2011. But on CNBC's Futures Now, noted investor Mark Faber provided an especially interesting one. So let's just dissect that particular paragraph. So they said, okay, so many reasons for gold's 30% decline and overall demolition. Gold has been demolished since it hit 1934 in September of 2011. So you have a financial publication whose author starts off by saying that gold has been demolished and then starts to make fun of Mark Faber because saying, oh, well, he has an especially interesting reason for gold's decline. And it goes on to say that Mark Faber said by phone that the reason is because the media doesn't like gold. Nobody at CNBC owns any gold. Nobody at Bloomberg owns gold. This isn't me talking. This is Mark Faber. Nobody at CNBC owns gold. Nobody at Bloomberg owns gold. Gold is being constantly talked down by the media. The Fed officials and economists who also don't own any gold, they're all stocked up in equities. And he says when people talk about gold, and that's the part that I just played, they're referred to as gold bugs. Well, the article goes on to say and make more fun of Faber by saying in September 2011, as gold was hitting its all-time highs, Faber called the metal dirt cheap and discussed the possibility of a gold price as high as $10,000 an ounce. You see, they're acting like he's an imbecile, because he said gold was dirt cheap at 1950 and said that it could hit $10,000 per ounce. But yet, the whole article is making fun of the fact that he's saying that media is talking down gold. And then they go on in the article of making fun of Faber to talk down gold. The very thing he accused them of, they go on to do in the article. It says gold has lost a third of its value since Faber's prediction. He goes on to say, Faber says, I have an exposure of approximately 25%, and just recently when it dropped, I bought some more. Nothing is particularly cheap, but gold is relatively cheap compared to equities at the present time. And then the author puts a disclosure on here. And the disclosure says, the writer of this article, indeed, does not own any gold. Okay, so let me tell you something. If you own gold, if you own silver, you're one of the small percentage of the U.S. population who is actually beginning to prepare. And if you don't own any gold and you don't own any silver, I feel extremely sad for your future and your situation, because the way that this world is going, I believe that it's something that will help carry you through what we're headed for. And why are we headed there? Because of the Pied Pipers. And it says here, I wrote a few notes before I came on the show, and one of them that I already touched on is I had a conversation with the client, and he says, there's a lot of smart people in the world, but they're not buying gold. The reason why is because they trust the information that's being fed to them by the mainstream media, and they would have to admit that everything they've been taught their entire life was wrong. The smartest people that I know are also the dumbest people that I know in many parts of their life. And those are the guys that are running the economy. Those are the guys that are calling the shots. And, I have another client that was very worried. He said, I don't really know if I should be buying gold and silver because everybody's doing it. Let me tell you something. That's not true. That less than 5% of the population, and that's just a rough estimate, but less than 5% of the population owns physical gold and silver. That, I believe, is amazing. The one monetary metal that's been around for thousands of years and less than 5% of the population owns it. They're full of dollars. That's what they have. I talked to a brand new client today. He's a financial advisor. He has $120 million under management that he personally manages. And it was his first gold purchase. He had never purchased anything before then. A guy that manages a $120 million fund did not have any physical gold or silver. It was his first purchase. Can you believe that? This is the example of what Mark Faber explained. The people at CNBC don't own any gold. The people at the Federal Reserve don't own any gold. The people who are calling the shots don't own any gold. Most economists don't own any gold. Financial managers that are managing $120 million funds don't own any gold. All right, coming to a break. We're going to close up on the backside. Looking forward to seeing you on the other side. All right, Gabe Elton with the Austin Report back on, sitting in for Charlie McGrath of Wide Awake News and on the one and only W.A.N.Radio network. Sorry there. Also, wanted to let you guys know, visit our website, www.austincoins.com. We also have our blog. You'll see a lot of our Austin reports end up on the blog. If you fill out the form there on the website for information, you will be on our email list and will be one of the first people to get these reports, and lots of times even before I'm able to present them to you guys here on the radio. So, moving on, I don't think I'm going to be able to cover everything that I have here in front of me. I have so much information to talk about that I might even have to come back in 2 weeks and finish up. But by the way, in 2 weeks, I have a guest coming on, Ellen Brown, author of Web of Debt. I'm looking extremely forward to having her as my guest. It'll be my first guest, and really excited about that. So we were talking about Mark Faber and how the media was laughing at him, saying that he was blaming gold's demise on them because the media talks it down, and CNBC reporters don't own gold, and then the reporter comes out and confirms that in fact he doesn't own gold, and then tries to make fun of him, saying the media talks down gold by proceeding to talk down gold. That's the world that we live in today. And then 7 days later, Bloomberg obliged Mark Faber's assertion, and they had an article entitled "Gold Euphoria Won't Last Long, Yellen's Rally Fading." Gold euphoria won't last with Yellen's rally fading. Sorry. And the authors of the story go on to bash gold. They say after the biggest gold slump in 3 decades left investors heartbroken, they're following Taylor Swift's advice and never, ever getting back together. Isn't that sweet? Taylor Swift's song, they're never, ever getting back together. They go on and say Janet Yellen, the one person able to make the lovers reconcile, did her best. Prices surged the most since September, the day after the Fed chair signaled last week that low interest rates are here to stay. Traders and analysts surveyed by Bloomberg News aren't expecting the euphoria to last. Volatility in futures is near a 4-year low at a time when trading volumes and open interest in COMEX contracts are waning. Prices will average $1,250 an ounce next quarter, about 5% less than they are now, according to the median of 15 estimates. And they go on and quote a guy who says the surge in gold can't sustain itself. And it says it was a temporary spike because of a confluence of events of Iraq and Yellen. People will be looking at other areas for excitement. Really? People are looking at other areas? Well, then why are gold and silver outperforming the Dow Jones by 400%? I bet you guys didn't know that. Since the first of the year, gold is up 9.8%, silver is up 7.4%, the Dow Jones is up 1.8%. Well, how could that be true if people are looking, according to Donald Selkin, who manages $3 billion of assets, at a chief market strategist at National Securities Corp? Oh, it's a temporary spike because of confluence of events. People will be looking at other areas for excitement. Well, that can't be true because gold is up more than 400% more than the Dow Jones. But yet, Bloomberg, a financial publication, expects you to believe that gold and investors are never, ever getting back together. They go on to say The median of 15 analyst and trader estimates compiled by Bloomberg by June 18th showed gold will average $1,240 in the fourth quarter and $1,300 in the first 3 months of next year. By June 20th, they were predicting $1,225 and $1,270 for the periods, not swayed by Yellen's outlook for low borrowing costs and echoing the sentiment, oh, here we go, Taylor Swift again, Swift's Grammy-nominated pop hit, "We Are Never, Ever Getting Back Together." I mean, did I just read that? Did you guys just hear that? Bloomberg is supposed to be a prestigious financial newspaper, and the author really did just quote Taylor Swift twice in the same article. How that ever got past an editor, even if you're trying to bash gold, is beyond me. I mean, it's almost comical. If it weren't so sad, it would be comical. But yet, when Faber comes out and says that the media talks down gold, he gets laughed at as if, he's some kind of prima donna or something, telling people to buy gold. And like he's a leper. And it's the craziest thing ever for investors to buy gold. The actual reporter from CNBC came and wrote an article the next day talking about how ridiculous it was. Well, maybe he doesn't read Bloomberg, because a week later, Bloomberg comes out with this article and quotes Taylor Swift twice in trying to prove that investors in gold are never getting back together. Now, if that isn't an example of a Pied Piper, I don't know what is. And they're trying to lead you astray. And that, I believe, is the reason why the client that I talked to today, who just placed his first order, he manages $120 million and never had any physical gold. That's why. I talked to the other client who said, there's a lot of smart people in the world. Why aren't they buying gold? That's why. And when Mark Faber comes out and says the media is talking down gold, this is how. You see, and the same financial publication, Bloomberg, came out with a bombshell about silver. And the title of that article is New Silver Benchmark Seen Heralding Gold Fix Revamp. New Silver Benchmark Seen Heralding Gold Fix Revamp. And in it says proposals to replace a 117-year-old system of fixing prices for the $5 trillion silver market are poised to add more transparency for the London benchmark used in the $18 trillion gold industry as well. And it goes on to say how there's only 2 banks left, and this price fixing procedure is going to end on August 14th. Mark that on your calendars. Mark July 1st on your calendars, by the way. This is an update that we sent out on Tuesday that if you go to our website, austincoins.com, and you fill out the form there, you would have been notified of this beforehand. July 1st is when FACTA regulations kick in, and that's one thing that Porter Stansberry has been warning about. He believes it's going to bring on the collapse of the dollar. I personally think it's just another piece of the puzzle. August 14th is the next date that you're going to want to mark on your calendar. That's when this silver price fixing ends. But going back, let's read that first paragraph one more time. Proposals to replace the 117-year-old system of fixing prices for the $5 trillion silver market. $5 trillion silver market. $5 trillion silver market. How can the silver market be $5 trillion? They only mine 700 million ounces per year. That's only $14.7 billion annual mining production. 700 million ounces. 14.7 billion. And they're saying that the silver market is 5 trillion, folks. That means that it is levered over 250 times annual production. If the silver market is $5 trillion, that means 250 times of it is paper. Paper. Shane McGuire, who wrote a book about silver and 2 books about gold, he manages a $12 billion fund. Everything, all the data and all the research that he's done shows that at any given time, there's only $1.5 billion worth of physical silver that can be purchased and delivered at any given time. $1.5 billion is all that's out there on any given day. And they say that the silver market is worth $5 trillion. That means that if going by the physical silver available for delivery, that it is levered more than 3,000 times. What's the real price of silver? What's the real price of gold? You know, we talk about gold. Germany recently, in another Bloomberg Pied Piper article says German gold stays in New York in rebuff to Euro doubters. And they're talking about Germany was repatriating their gold. And this story broke on Monday, the 23rd. And basically what they said is they've decided that the gold is safe in America. There's no need to send it back to Germany. And one of the funniest quotes that I've read in quite a while, Norbert Barthel, the budget spokesman for Merkel's Christian Democratic bloc in Parliament, said in an interview, the Americans are taking good care of our gold. They're taking good care of our gold. There's no need for us to get it back. You can keep it. Forget the fact that the gold bars that were sent to them in the first place had to be reassayed, as if there's no problem there. That doesn't say that we're taking good care of it. What, in fact, does taking good care of it mean? Does it mean that they're petting it on a daily basis? Are they taking it out for a walk? Taking good care? They say that ending talk of repatriating the world's second biggest gold reserves removes a potential irritant in U.S.-Germany relations. So why would it be an irritant if the gold was really there? And the fact that they asked for it back, that's the irritant? Or is the irritant the fact that we don't have it to give to them? And they go on to say, one of the guys from the CDU, that's Merkel's party, says there's no evidence that the German gold at the New York Fed has been tampered with. Really? Well, then why did it have to be recast before they took it for delivery? You see, these are the stories that the Pied Pipers are telling us, and time is short. If you listen to what's being said on the media, if you listen to your mainstream financial advisor with those 3 degrees, if you listen to most financial publications, you're being led astray, you're being led out of your village, and you're following the Pied Piper like a group of children. And we have representatives here to help you understand the intricacies and the nuances of the gold and silver market. There are things that you aren't being told by those other dealers that you might be talking to. If you haven't started to prepare, and even if you have, give us a call. I think that you're going to find our insight extremely informative. It's going to save you potentially lots of money and potentially lots of time doing the wrong thing. We want to work with you on a step-by-step basis. Our information is completely free. 1-800-928-6468, www.austincoins.com.